Hello, Year 6. This is Chapter 8 of Pig Heart Boy, and it's called The Announcement. Cam, can I borrow your French homework? I didn't get a chance to finish mine, you see, said Andrew. I turned to look at him. If you ever came up to me and said, Cam, I don't need to copy your homework because I've done it, I think I'd faint with shock. Oh, go on, Andrew pleaded. Here you are, I said, but I couldn't keep the long-suffering sigh out of my voice. But I do want it back by the end of the first lesson, understand? Oh, great, thanks, said Andrew. Andrew, lend me Cam's homework when you're done with it, yeah? Said Bran. You lot could try and do your own homework instead of copying mine all the time, I said, exasperated. Why have a dog and bark yourself, said Bran, grinning. My mouth fell open. You certainly can't have enough to say in that. Bran laughed. Come on, Cam, it was only teasing. Yeah, right, I sniffed. The first buzzer had sounded, so we were 5 minutes before getting to class. I looked up at the blue sky. Dotted here and there were snow-white clouds. It was such a beautiful day. The morning sunshine felt warm and very welcome on my face. This was the kind of day where your slightest wish could come true, I felt. All you had to do was ask. It was just a shame we'd been cooped up in the stuffy old classroom, I suppose, until break time. Marlon, Andrew, Bran and I walked across the school grounds to get to the class. I looked around at all the other kids and grown-ups who were milling around. Not that I'd ever admit to anyone, but I really did like school. Julie and Nina from our class walked right in front of us. Their arms were linked. They were obviously posing. Why do girls always walk together with their arms linked, I thought. It's as if they're afraid they'd keel over or if they'd have to stand up all by themselves. Julie smiled at me, though. Hi, Cam. I could feel my face begin to burn. Hi, Julie, I mumbled. Guess what? I'm going to be in an ad on telly. Are you really? I said eagerly. What ad and when's it coming out? It's out next week. Oh, well, I'll definitely watch it. I'm not surprised, though. You're pretty enough to be on telly. Stunned, I stared at Julie. I couldn't believe what I'd just blurted out. What on earth had come over me? Now all I wanted to do was a hole to open up and swallow me all the way down to New Zealand. Nina laughed. In fact, everyone was laughing. Everyone except Marlon. He just shook his head, because he knew what I was like. Sometimes I suffered badly from what my nan would call foot-in-mouth disease. Julie was smiling again at me, though. Cam, I'm only pulling your leg. I just wanted to see what your reaction would be. To be fair, it was worth it. Shame, shame, shame. The word emblazoned across the sky now in huge letters. Great godlike hands were almost coming down to me and pointing directly at me. Shame, shame, shame. How could I be such an enormous nit? Everyone was laughing harder than ever now, of course. All right, I mumbled. Why was I so gullible? Every time someone came up with a cock and bull story, I'd swallow it hook, line and sinker. Cam, I only pull the legs of the boys I like, you know that, Julie's told me softly. Pass the sick bag, Marlon scoffed from the side. And you're just jealous then, Julie said immediately. Me? Well, I didn't know what to think. I even managed to smile at Julie, even when I was being embarrassed like that. But only just. After all, she liked me. That made the teasing worth it. Well, almost. Cam, can I borrow your maths homework? Just to check and see if I've done it right, Julie asked with a lovely smile. Sure, I dug it out of my bag. It fell on the floor. I took a step forward to get it and ended up standing on it. Then I tried to pick it up and suddenly my hands were all sweaty and I dropped it again. When I finally managed to pick up my bag, you could have fried 2 eggs on my face and they would have cooked in 5 seconds flat. I got out my maths homework and handed it straight to her. Can I borrow after Julie? Marlon asked quickly. I didn't get a chance to finish mine. How come you don't whinge when Julie asks if she can borrow your homework then? Bran smiled knowingly. Andrew stared at me. What maths homework? Marlon grinned. Bran, if you wore a skirt and batted your eyes at Cam, I'm sure he'd lend his homework without a single complaint too. Oh, bog off both of you, I replied. My face was now obviously hotter than ever, hotter than molten lava. What maths homework? Andrew said again, beginning to panic. Andrew, you can borrow it after Julie, if that's okay, I said, exasperated. Julie winked. Thanks, Cam, you are a real pal. I would have lent her my homework without all the lovey-dovey goo eyes stuff, because I really liked Julie, but at that moment I did want her to just disappear. She must have read my mind, because she and Nina sauntered off, holding arms again. You fancy Julie, don't you? Marlon teased. Only so I could hear him, though. That's a lie. Who said it? I did. I don't. No one, but come on, my eyeballs work just fine. She obviously likes you as well. Why don't you ask her out? I looked around quite quickly, but Andrew and Bram were too busy talking to hear our conversation. They were discussing how best to copy my homework, actually. So why don't you ask her out then? Marlon repeated. Shh, keep your voice down, I begged. Besides, if she said yes, well, I think it was because I'm ill. And if she said no, well, I think it's because I was ill. Marlon gave me a look. It must be real hard work being you. It is, I agreed. Oh, and before I forget, here you are. I dug into my bag and took out a crumpled piece of paper. What's this? The maths homework. I copied it out for you already. Marlon grinned at me and snatched up my hand. You're welcome, I said dryly. Oh, Cameron, can I have a word? I turned my head and Sticky Stewart, our class teacher, came running up to me from behind. We all call him Sticky behind his back because he's tall, lanky, and reminded everyone of a stick insect. To be honest, I was the one who came up with the nickname. I only meant it as a small joke, and I hadn't expected it to take off quite the way it had. Yes, sir, of course. Well, if I can have that word, and he looked around pointedly at Marl and Andrew and Bran, who are now walking with me. But in private? Cam, we'll see you in class then, Marlon said to me, giving his teacher a suspicious look. I watched as my friends walked away before turning back to the teacher. I've heard from your mum and dad that you'll be away from next week onward for some considerable time. I froze. What had mum and dad said, and why hadn't they warned me first they were going to do it? You're going to have a heart transplant, is that right? I nodded. Would you mind if I told the rest of the class then? I'm sure they'd all like to join me in wishing you all the very best of luck. What else did mum and dad say? What else did mum and dad say? Went round in my head. Mr. Stewart raised his eyebrows. Well, they didn't say anything, really. Is there anything else? No, I said. So can I tell the class then? I shrugged. Well, I guess so. Good, Mr. Stewart bleated off before I had even a chance to change my mind, which I was actually going to do. He bounded across the school grounds with a leaping walk of his, and I knew that even if I ran after him, I'd never actually catch him. What was wrong with letting the class know that I was going to have a heart transplant? Only Marlon knew the true full facts, and he wouldn't say anything. So why was I so upset about the rest of the class knowing about my operation? Maybe I didn't want him to feel sorry for me, that's one thing. Maybe I didn't want him thinking that I was even more feeble than I really was. But that's silly. You could be super duper fit and still need an operation of any kind. Look at the footballers and boxers who have operations on their knees and other parts all the time. So why was I so upset? Still trying to work it out, I made my way to class. I was in the corridor, only about 3 meters away from my classroom, when I saw the worst face in the world. I didn't bother to hide my groan that passed through my entire body. Look who it isn't. Mr. Muscles himself. Here we go again, I sighed. It was Travis Cross, the year hardened. He'd spotted me and was now headed straight for me, followed by his cronies, just behind him. Marlon came out of the class. What do you want, Travis? I asked wearily. I look at a real live walking, talking weed. That's what, said Travis. Travis, haven't you got something better to do? Marlon scoffed. Like stick your head in a food processor or something? Marlon to the rescue again. Travis gave me such a look of content that I flinched in spite of myself. I can take care of myself, I told him. And Marlon. Yeah, right. Travis and his morons then creased around laughing. One puff and we could blow you over. Blow you over? Actually, we could blow you down the corridor more like. Well, you could try, I said, squaring up to him. Come on, you're not even a challenge, Travis said with disgust. It'd be like taking sweets from a baby, hardly worthwhile. Then bog off then, Marlon told him. Travis carried on walking, deliberately barging into me, and to my shame, he did almost knock me over. Marlon rushed forward to help me. I brushed him aside and straightened up. Look, I'm all right, I said it impatiently, of course. Don't fuss, leave me alone, I'm okay. Marlon backed off immediately. Come on then, before we're late, he said. I turned to watch Travis and his friends laughing as they sauntered down the corridor. At that moment, I really hated Travis and his friends. I followed Marlon into class, wondering if I'd always be so ineffectual. Travis was right. I was a weed. How are you feeling? Marlon asked quietly. Fine, I said brusquely. Even though I was reading through the last remaining piece of homework I'd been left with, I could sense that Marlon was still watching me. I frowned at him. What's the problem? Oh, Cam, whatever happens, we'll always be friends, won't we? Said Marlon. Where did that come from? I asked, surprised. Will we be friends? Yeah? Always? Of course, I said. Why would we stop being friends? And at that moment, Mr. Stewart entered the room. Settle down, everyone, he called out. Look, you're my best friend, Cam, Marlon said. I wouldn't want anything to change about that, okay? Marlon, why? Quiet, please. I said quiet, Mr. Stewart yelled over the top of his lungs to make himself heard. I just wanted to say, Marlon whispered to me. I'm sorry, Marlon. Am I disturbing the conversation or something? Mr. Stewart was a sarky old trout, but at that moment he did make me laugh. Sorry, sir, Marlon mumbled. That's better. Mr. Stewart nodded with satisfaction. Now then, I have an important announcement to make. This is Cameron's last day in school for a while. He's going into hospital next week, you see, to have a heart transplant. Marlon gasped beside me. I glanced at him, then found it hard to turn away from the shocked expression on his face. So, I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing him a speedy recovery, and I know we'll all be keeping him in our thoughts and our prayers. I bent my head, wishing the teacher would now just shut up. He was embarrassing me something chronic. I scowled down at my lap as he withered on. And maybe some of us would come and visit you a while in hospital. Would you like that, Cam? I looked up and smiled wanly. I couldn't think of anything I'd hate more, in fact. It was bad enough that the teachers and best friends already treated me like I was about to snuff it at any moment, without them seeing me in hospital after a major operation. No, thank you very much. Cameron, would you like to come in front of the class maybe and say a few words? A few words? How about 2 words, I thought to myself. Bog off. No way, or maybe go away. No thanks, I said aloud. How could he? How could he show me up like that? Say a few words in front of the class. Is he nuts? Mr. Stewart smiled. Oh, come on, are you sure? And the more he smiled and the more I scowled until I felt the anger welling up inside me, about to make me pop like a balloon. Are you really sure? Come on, Mr. Stewart fixed me with what was obviously his most encouraging of smiles. I stood up. Okay, he's asked for this. And he was going to get it. Cameron, what are you doing? Are you feeling all right? Marlon whispered urgently. He obviously knew how I felt. He pulled on my sleeve, but I shrugged him off. Mr. Stewart wanted me to talk to the rest of the class, and that was exactly what I was going to do now. I walked to the front, and Mr. Stewart was positively beaming at me now, of course. I turned my back on him to face the class. I'm due to have a heart transplant operation next week. Mr. Stewart scraped his chair along the floor, sit facing me with the rest of the class. Oh, sorry, he said in a stage whisper. Go on, carry on, Cam. Well, I've been doing some reading about exactly what happens when you first have a heart transplant, I continued. First, they take a razor-sharp scalpel, which is like a knife, with an ultra-thin blade on, and then they slice into your skin from just below your collarbone here, all the way down to here, and I stuck my finger near my belly button. I didn't think they'd cut that far, but, well, I wasn't going to stop now. And then they take a sharp saw, it's a bit like a hacksaw, and then they saw your breastbone in half, which is right here. They use it then, a clamp, to then pull the breastbone apart so they can get to your heart. Cameron, this isn't exactly what I had in mind, Mr. Stewart leapt to his feet appalled. I'm sorry, sir. I thought you wanted me to tell everyone about heart transplants. I'm getting to the good bit in a moment. No, Cameron, I think that's quite enough, thank you, Mr. Stewart said firmly. Oh, but I don't understand, sir. I feigned ignorance, of course. What did you want me to talk about then? I thought you could talk to us about, what will happen next week, but without being quite so graphic. I looked around the classroom. Mr. Stewart wasn't the only one who was now looking appalled. I'd only meant it as a joke, but more than one shocked face was staring back at me, and Julie's eyes were glistening and her lips were turned down. Andrew looked like he was going to be sick, and even Marlon looked upset. The joke I had just done had backfired. I took a deep breath. Look, everyone, it's not as bad as it sounds, I started again. It's just that our hearts are really well protected. I was trying to make that point. When you think about it, we could do without most of our things in our bodies, except our brains and our hearts. Our brains are really well protected by our skulls, and our hearts, well, they're protected behind our rib cage. So they have to move the rib cage out of the way to get to my heart. That's all I was trying to say. Mr. Stewart sat down again, slowly, and then I carried on. And think about it. Every other part of the body gets to have a rest. Even your brains at certain points of the day when we're asleep get to have a part of a rest. But not our hearts. Our hearts keep pumping and pumping. The heart is a really strong muscle that lasts for all our lives. But sometimes, like in my case, something goes wrong. And when something's wrong with it, it has to be replaced. So that's what's going to happen to me next week. When they replace my heart, I'll be unconscious, and that's the way, and I'll stay that way until the doctors are finished. So I won't feel a thing as well. And besides, heart transplants are common operations now. They're as common as, taking out your appendix. I knew that wasn't quite true, but never mind. It had the desired effect. Mr. Stewart was beginning to smile again, and everyone else looked far less worried. It was strange, but in that moment, it was as if everyone in the class was on my side, as if everyone was worried about me and rooting for me. It was a good feeling. I was cared about, and I belonged. I'm sorry about before. I really didn't mean to scare anyone, I mumbled. That's all right. Mr. Stewart's lighthouse beam was back. He leapt up, faced the rest of the class, and then declared, "Let's give Cameron a big round of applause." A couple of people in the back started clapping, and everyone else joined in. I've never been so humiliated in all my life. I scowled at the back of Mr. Stewart's head. He'd made me very, very sorry I hadn't continued my original description of the heart operation. It seemed to me that that was all grown-ups ever did. They either talked down to you, they ignored you, or they showed you up something chronic. I just hoped and prayed that I would grow older, but I would not grow up. To be a grown-up, to me, was the lowest of the low. The next chapter is called Chapter 9, and it's called Messages. Mrs. Davis will read that for you next time. Bye-bye.